So these were made in VA last year, right?
Not made in VA. Some of them were in the More Than Shops. Because there's also 6 at Virginia Beach over there. And I have others in addition to the ones here, because these were all ones that were taken from books of old postcards of Virginia Beach. It's hard for me to sew directly into postcards, so it's easier to do the reproductions. So I have a whole series, and so yeah, some of them I think definitely were in that show. And we have the bifold, that's really nice because in it Chelsea breaks down, since there's a lot of techniques that maybe people aren't super familiar with, it explains what image transfers are, like the different kinds that I'm using, and also some of like, the embroidery stitches, explains the air dry polymer clay that's in the sculptures, just to kind of make people understand like what they're seeing in a different way. So I really appreciate that they took the time to put that together.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved with embroidery?
I was in a Fiber and Materials Studies Master's program, MFA program at SAIC. And when I was starting my first semester as a TA, the professor, I was looking at the syllabus, he's like, well, what can you demo for the students? And I didn't have a fibers background really. I like process-based work, and I applied with a bunch of altered books that I had made. And so I was like, I think hand embroidery is something I can actually teach myself enough to help the students. So I did that. So I started teaching myself from YouTube videos how to do the basic stitches, and really liked it. I always loved drawing, and for me, embroidery is expanded drawing. It's just kind of slowed down, like really textured version of that.
Nice. So how did you develop your personal style?
I think just over a lot of time. Yeah, I've been doing the plants, I started as like doodles, but I was always really drawn to kind of vintage, like Art Nouveau posters and vintage scientific illustrations. So those are a big influence. I've been working with that kind of imagery since probably even before I was doing my master's. But yeah, I think, over time I've just learned what kinds of things are interesting to me that I respond to, what materials, what processes, and some I've just really fully embraced, and things like the air dry clay and just accumulating it to this like kind of insane degree. And same with some of the embroidery. It's just just letting myself just go to this extreme with everything that I do. I think is a lot of the style. It's just that very obsessive, repetitive, intricate, like detailed, overwhelming people with the texture and the amount of detail. But that's what is interesting to me too. So.
Were these all things you are already kind of drawn to, like the textiles and the vintage photography?
I guess the vintage photography, definitely. I didn't necessarily have a lot of familiarity with the history of textiles before I was doing my master's. My grandmother crocheted when I was growing up, and so she taught me some of that, but nobody in my family did any sort of needlework with me. I also had a grandmother who made quilts, but that's piecework's a different thing, and that was wasn't something that she taught me either. So it was really starting fresh. And when I first was doing it, I wasn't working with like floral motifs or thinking about things that way. I think there is kind of this real bias towards things that get classed as decorative arts in contemporary art still. And so I felt like I couldn't do it. And it was, I was using it as drawing at first. And so people were like, oh, so it's about feminism, whether I wanted it to be or not, just because that is what it's associated with in Western culture, not in the whole world. But, this idea that only delicate feminine fingers can do detailed needlework is, European and American culture really ingrained. But I started working with found textiles when I did a residency in Ukraine in 2019. And, they still do a lot of handwork in Eastern Europe. And so I was able to go to markets and find these amazing hand embroidered textiles just in piles on a blanket on the side of the road. And I think the most I ever paid for one was $8. And it was a giant embroidered tablecloth, like huge. And so I love the idea of then collaging into it and responding to the embroidery with my own. So I see them all as collaborations between me and these anonymous women. And it means a lot to me to get to take this work that wasn't valued because it was made by women in a home instead of a man in a studio, and have it in these kinds of art spaces where it's framed and it's on the wall and it is being treated as something that's valuable and important. So then, now there's a lot of that. I introduced a lot of the floral motifs, and suddenly I went from somebody who's like, I'm not going to sew flowers to that's most of what I do.
Really? Do you feel like you've grown to love it though?
Yeah, I mean, they're beautiful. I think there is just a bias towards, with contemporary art, that beautiful things can't be complicated enough to be interesting. And again, I think that's just generally, this idea. Our whole society, it's not even just with art, just dismisses things that are traditionally classed as feminine. Fashion is treated as so frivolous by the same people that will take sports really seriously, and I mean, I like sports too, but it is just this weird thing that, people acted like Twilight being popular was the end of culture, but then Transformers movies don't have that same dialogue. And it's they're both pop culture, kind of trashy, fun stuff.
Right.
They're not high art, but there's kind of this specific hatred towards things that, are associated with females. And I had to contend with that myself. I grew up in this culture. I have that same kind of bias that I was coming from. And now it's, now I don't even think about it. It's just what I'm looking at all the time and what I'm doing. And yeah.
Awesome. It's interesting that you say that because I feel like Barbenheimer kind of did that again. But I don't know. I'm starting to see a little bit more kind of flexibility with that. So I
definitely.
think I hope that's going to continue.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, and it's great seeing, famous people playing with those ideas, but there's still kind of, it's the same with fibers art. If a white, straight, male American artist is doing embroidery, that gets treated as oh, wow, you did embroidery. That's just so cool that you would do that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, it's, and I mean, I want men to embroider. I think that's fantastic. But there is kind of well, why? It's the same when Harry Styles wears a dress and makeup and everybody's whoa.
Revolutionary.
That's so cool. But when women are into clothes and makeup, that's seen as frivolous and shallow. Right. And so I don't like those double standards that are still present, but I do like to see that there are a lot more men engaging in this kind of work now, and that we're not so fixated on these gender binaries. But, I mean, like I said, it was something that was being projected on the work anyway. As soon as I started working with embroidery, even when it wasn't something I was trying to engage with. And so over time, I think I, have shifted to where I see it as a strength, where I think the industrialization and capitalism that is driving a lot of these environmental issues we're facing, is very much associated with men because we're in a patriarchy, and that's where that's come from. And so now the fact that I'm doing this with embroidery adds a separate layer to that, because people read that as feminine, whether, you know, it should or not. And so I'm like, well, let's use this bias to like make that contrast. And, you know, even just like architecture, a lot of the stuff I'm doing is like skyscrapers or this big brutalist concrete structures. You know, again, it's coded as being like male. It's standing for, you know, Stalin or Putin. And so embroidering flowers over it makes more of a statement than if I was doing it in a different media that didn't carry that baggage.
That's so awesome. Do you have a favorite piece in the series?
I read this dollhouse. It's my childhood dollhouse.
Gorgeous.
And my dad made it for me when I was 5. It was sitting in the attic for a long time. A couple years ago, I first was thinking about doing something with it because I moved back in 2020 during the pandemic. So, but I didn't, you know, making a sculpture this size, it's a commitment. It's time-wise, but also storing. And so I wanted to do it when I knew it was going to be seen. And so as soon as I found out I got the show, that was when I was like, okay, time to do the dollhouse now.
Awesome.
So this is it's made specifically for the show, and my dad is credited as a co-collaborator.
Oh, that's so cool.
So he's very excited about that, very proud of that. He is telling people that he has a show at the Chrysler, and his work is on display, and we kind of went to studio visit with Chelsea, the curator. So it's really, it's been cool to get to have this here, and my grandparents bought the kit that my dad made the dollhouse from, so there's like that part too, like they're no longer alive, but you know, there's that thing that's, you know, now getting passed
it's a legacy
down. Yeah,
that's beautiful. Man, it's all air dry clay. That's so neat. I almost always find a way to tie in pieces of art with pop culture, and it almost looks like spores, and it kind of makes me think of The Last of Us.
Yeah, I get that a lot.
Yeah.
I was a little, at the beginning there were lots of spores. There were not so many mushrooms later on in the season, so I was a little disappointed by that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the imagery of that show, and actually, like, I have some pieces that have mushrooms. So I think actually in the press release, they even kind of reference The Last of Us.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I mean, this and then the mushrooms over there were made before the show came out. And I mean, I was vaguely aware. I don't think I knew it was a mushroom thing. My brother played the game, but I did watch the show with him, and I loved the way, like, just the faces with the mushrooms growing on them was something that I found really interesting.
I love the shrink film. Did you play with that as a kid at all?
No, it's funny that, and the clay's model magic. Just, you know, we're not getting paid by Crayola, so hot and air dry. But, you know, I rediscovered both materials doing art camps at the Art Institute of Chicago when I was in school. Doing my master's, I was like, oh, these are really amazing materials. Why aren't adult artists using these more? So really nice. Like, the fact that it's that polymer clay, it means that it's light enough that I'm able to kind of travel with it, which is a really big deal. Like, this piece I worked on for 3 months at a residency last year in France, and so I had it in tiles that could be, I made like tiers in a box and shipped them in 2 boxes, and they weighed less than 15 pounds each.
Wow.
And I mean, now it's I couldn't figure out a way to like maintain that and have it look the way I wanted, so it's in that frame, which is heavy. But, you know, at least for that trip, I got to, you know, it wasn't super heavy, so it was within the budget that I had with the residency to be able to ship them back.
That's amazing. So there are so many factors that go into planning your work, especially with the residencies.
Yeah, definitely. Like, same with these, where the suitcases have a weight to them, but like the clay itself isn't excessively heavy, so it wouldn't be as hard to be paying to ship them, and so it's a nice material. It's a lot. Yeah, clay would be so heavy.
Yeah, it's so neat.
Yeah, and then Chelsea had the brilliant idea to combine the postcards with the suitcases. Love that.
And you did kind of collage with them?
So they're, it's image transfer, xylene transfer.
Okay.
So I painted over part of it with just white acrylic paint, sanded to get it nice and smooth, and then did the, it's actually a much more intense process, I think, than it seems at first, because then I take the photo and I put it in Photoshop and, isolate that area and like put the image that I want to transfer into just that shape, and it has to be sized the exact same as the postcard, and then flipped, and then printed out face down, put the xylene, the colorless blender with the xylene in it on the back, and burnish it.
Okay.
So that's why you get that, it gets that nice degraded kind of image that's vintage, and especially since a lot of these postcards are old postcards, I like the way it looks, but it is, there's actually several steps in the process.
That's amazing.
Sometimes they don't turn out the way I want just because it's an unpredictable process. So I have to like paint it over and start over again.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's worth it though. It's so gorgeous. I had a chance to read your book too. That was really cool.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gave some copies to Virginia Mocha. Yeah, that was another thing that was just really nice timing, because I made it through the residency I did last year. I got part of it was like a grant specifically to make a publication, and so I had made that and got it back in March, and then found out about the show like a couple weeks later.
Oh wow.
And so then it was, because the Chrysler doesn't necessarily, it's hard to produce a catalog, and especially in a tight time frame.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been able, since it's the same body of work, to function that way with this and give people extra context. And we actually had copies of the original book in the gallery, and they both got stolen within the first week.
No.
So that's why we switched to the binders, which have not gotten stolen.
That's good.
Because I was like, I don't want to burn 2 copies of the book a week. That's a lot. But they do have it in the gift shop, so that's nice too, that like they can kind of get out in the world that way. Yeah, the first one got stolen the first day of the show during a meet and greet where Chelsea and I were both here. And so I was like, that is bold.
Yeah.
Like, how often are her and I both in the gallery at the same time during public hours? Like, rarely, twice since it's open, and so to take it then of all times is just really funny. It was like by the end of the time, I was like, oh, wait, one of the books get stolen? Like,
no.
Animations that I did.
Oh wow.
Photoshop, where it's also like a convoluted process where I take photos of my embroidery and remove the background, and then I erase it a little bit at a time in different layers, and then using Photoshop timeline, have different layers becoming visible and invisible over time to give it that like going backwards from the order in which I erase it to make it look like that it's growing.
Oh my gosh.
And then combining it with like these time lapses of the sky and the architecture.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So I have 3 of these that I've done so far, but I would like to do more. I feel like there's a lot of trial and error, and so I like to try again now. And if I had resources to also just work with some like people that could help me more with like getting sounds. There actually is sound that they haven't. That isn't part of the exhibition. That there is like a soundtrack where like, the nature sounds kind of build throughout the video. So by the end, they're kind of dominating bees buzzing and birds chirping and
That's
thunder.
really cool. Wow. So is this also an image transfer or?
So yeah, this is a gel transfer, you know, where you put gel medium over top of either toner-based or clay-coated image, and then you put it face down, like, you know, medium image size, side down on the fabric, and put it weights on it overnight. And once it's fully dry, you just soak the paper backing, and you're left with the image that sticks to the gel.
Oh, that's so cool.
And so, like, depending on the fabric, you can see this being really old, soft fabric. Like, there's parts that it didn't really stick.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it adds to that, you know. I think for this, it works, but you're not going to get, you know, like, there's services where you can get photographs printed on fabric in a really precise way, but I don't think that works the best for what I'm doing. And then this cut work is mine, and then the rest is the original.
Oh, wow. That's so cool. So you kind of blended a couple of pieces together.
Yeah.
And made it your own.
So yeah, all the textiles had embroidery to begin with, and then I add the photographs and then add my own embroidery. And some it's really, I think, more obvious than others. Like there's one over there that we were looking at last week, and I couldn't remember exactly what was what, and then I had to go back. So like I ended up sending Chelsea the photo later of like, I found it before I added my stuff. So I was like, yeah, those blue flowers are there, but then I added those vines, and like it's.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I try to do that. I try to get photos of what it's like before, so I can show. Usually what was there before is the more ordered part, and then my stuff tends to be like little tendrils, leaves growing everywhere, because that's what's more fun for me to sew, and I think it just works better anyway with what I want to do. You know, I mean, like with the Mocha show, the idea of like the very ordered lawns and gardens versus what is best for biodiversity in nature, and so I like that contrast. And I had so much fun with the lenticular prints in my show. I want to make more of those.
Awesome.
It was fun to get to watch people like having to.
Right? Oh man, I can't wait to see what else you're doing in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would love to do like projection mapping, where I have the, you know, embroidered plants growing like on a building, like a real building, or like augmented reality. So it's just trying to find a way to get those kind of resources and training to be able to work with people that can help me do that.
That's so cool.
And when I was in France last year, I saw the Bayeux Tapestry, which is 79 meters long. It's from the, I think, like 1070, and it shows the Battle of Hastings in 1066, where the Norman conquest of England, William the Conqueror. And so it starts like from the beginning, and each panel is telling a portion of the story.
Wow.
And I want to do something like that. It's like the story of my plant apocalypse. And, you know, it used to be brought out. It was made by, they think it was commissioned by his brother, who stayed and was ruling Normandy when he went to be King of England. And that it would be brought out like a few weeks a year and just put going all the way around the cathedral there, so that the, you know, base of the population that was not literate at the time could just know the story of like why this family is so amazing. And, you know, yeah, because it's also like the very much the French version of that story. About how, you know, so they were trying to con him out of this throne that he deserved, because he was supposed to be the heir, but at the same time it's also like, well, but why does this foreign guy get to be our king? We have a British guy here. So yeah, I was very inspired by that, and I love the idea of just making something that crazy with photo collage. I would incorporate the photo transfers and collage a bit with the embroidery, and like get some existing embroidery to make it more manageable, and it just fits with what I do anyway. But it's definitely like be a really big project.
That's a really cool idea.
Yeah, I've got a lot that I want to still do for sure.